It's Thursday Night Live with your host, Dennis Wiles, Barry Rock, Kurt Grice, and Katie Hodges. Ladies and gentlemen, here's your hosts.
Well, we believe that this is episode number 32.
No way.
Wow.
Yeah,
No way.
That's incredible.
It is incredible.
And let's just sit there for a second and just soak that up.
32.
Yeah, 32 episodes that weekly
Congratulations,
have
guys.
delivered all the stuff it takes for you to live a life worth living.
I can't imagine there's anything left to talk about.
Who's been here for every single episode?
Seriously?
Yeah.
I wasn't invited to the table.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Early on.
And you notice you haven't gotten your contract for next season either. You will. We're still talking.
Our producer, Andy Malorn, has said he has not missed one either.
That's true.
So
There would be no show. There would be no show without Andy.
That's right.
No,
That's
I've
exactly
I've
right.
missed for 2 funerals. Thank you.
yeah, my
Yeah,
mom had a pretty
that's right.
extensive surgery. So
You missed Kurt. Have you missed Kurt? Have you
Yeah, I
missed
missed.
Kurt?
I was in the hospital a couple of times. But, there's no excuse. There's no
Yeah,
excuse.
so feel good about you. The
You're
only
cool.
one,
So-
the only one that's been through all of it hadn't gone through any tragedy. So thank you.
Yeah.
That's just
That's right.
Yeah.
It's
You
gotta
know
be a
what?
pastor.
This
This
is a
is-
perfect lead into tonight's topic.
Really?
speaking of. It's really good that we've already got people making comments. We've got our regulars, and I hope that
Do you have any irregulars?
I was going to say, I hope that there's some irregulars going to join us because they're the most fun. And so thank you all for being a part of this. Some of you all, I'd love to know if there's anybody out there that's heard all 32 episodes. Now, that would be,
there's got to be a prize.
Yeah.
we have inflicted ourselves upon you. I want to know if there's anybody out there that's been man or woman enough to take all 32 episodes. That's what I want to know.
Well, if
So-
there is, they deserve a special prize.
They do. We need to
They
figure
do.
that out, don't we?
Okay,
Yeah,
we'll talk
right
about
in.
that.
Yeah.
But you got to verify. So we expect an essay about every
Well,
single
yeah.
episode.
Yeah.
Just
Kim
And
and Sandy chiming in.
it turns out it takes a whole lot to verify things these days. So just be
Boy,
careful
it
if you're going to
does.
say
It does.
that.
Yeah, it could
And
be
even
weeks.
after you do, you can get sued for it.
That's right.
It could be
a
weeks
while.
before we know.
That's right.
Well, it is good to
Just
see you,
saying.
my friends. And thank you all for being just that. And thank you all out there for being our extended friendship. And we're grateful to be here tonight. And so I'm just going to admit it out loud. I did not hear the sermon this past Sunday. We had several things going on around the church that I was a part of, and I did not listen to the sermon. And so, in all honesty, Dennis, I need you to bring me up to speed so that I know what we're going to talk about tonight.
You're
Let
ready.
me just say this. How many years did you sit on the platform with me as a minister of music? About
87, 86.
I mean,
No.
think about for with me probably
Yeah.
15-ish.
15
wouldn't you
years.
say?
Yeah, 15 years.
And I don't know that you listened to every one of them even then. You know,
No,
I'm not
No.
sure.
no.
You know, so
You
just being
know,
honest.
Dennis, you know how those music people are. When they've done their bit,
Boy,
they're
howdy. Boy,
assuming
howdy.
that's the best there is. They leave.
That's
Yeah, we
right.
were usually out back at the bus smoking.
So anyway, and on that note, the good news is Katie has heard the sermon, as has Kurt.
You know,
So
I
we'll-
missed it on Sunday, but we have it, streaming on various platforms. I listened to the
Mhm.
podcast today. It's
Mhm.
just real easy.
How long ago, Katie? How long ago?
Well, when I finished or when I started?
And
Hey,
they,
Patty
there you
Grubauer is saying that she's done them all.
Way to go, Patty. Sweet
There
Patty
you go.
Grubauer.
Very
See there?
impressive.
I love her.
Yeah, I
Faithful.
love her. She's good. Well, I appreciate
All
your
right,
honesty, Barry. The sermon was on honesty, and I appreciate you being honest. Because
Good.
I'd hate for you to be caught up short tonight. And
Then I didn't need it.
Actually, the sermon was entitled "Dinner's Ready," and it was aimed at us understanding the teaching of Jesus. He happened to be at a Pharisee's house. It came from Luke 14 was our text, the Gospel of Luke, and Jesus was eating with the Pharisees. It really says something interesting in Luke 14 that when Jesus went to eat, it says he was being carefully watched. And so we talked a little bit at Sunday about how often you find, just in Luke's Gospel, you find Jesus at a meal, just having a conversation. And so one of the first things that we talked about was just that meals are special events. They actually, I believe, can be sacred events. And that I just asked the church to think about what meals are like in their home. And I realize that sometimes our meals are very hurried and harried. Maybe we're sitting in front of the TV, or maybe we're eating in the car, or, we obviously, Kurt and I, we go to Rome every year. And what's interesting is in the Roman culture,
we used to go to Rome every year.
Well, true. Used to go every year. Didn't go this year, or this next year rather. But that people don't eat outside there. In other words, they will at a restaurant, but they don't like walk and eat. They don't. If you see somebody doing that, that's a tourist. The Roman culture, the Italian people, when they're going to eat, and that sounds like a stereotype, but I'm just saying meals are important, and they're to be done at a table with people. You don't just walk around eating your food. They don't do that. They think that's very weird, and we do that as a matter of course. You see people going down the sidewalk, eating a Subway sandwich and drinking a Coke on their way to a meeting. So I understand that happens some. However, we just talked a little bit about how special meals can be, and that when you're invited to a table, it can be a sacred event, and how often we find Jesus at meals in the New Testament, and how the table became a very special place for him. And just thought together about how often you find him at a table, and what did he teach us, when he's at a table with various people. What do we learn from Jesus? And in this particular instance of Luke 14, he talked about several things. It just so happened at this particular meal, it was on a Sabbath, and there was a guy who was struggling with a physical malady. And Jesus was looking at him and seeing him suffer. And he looked at these Pharisees and these teachers and said, "What do y'all think? Should we let him suffer or heal him? What's the right thing to do? It's the Sabbath, so maybe you're not supposed to heal him on the Sabbath. So isn't it better just let him?" He didn't put it in those words, but that seems to be the context. You guys would probably say, "Well, just let him suffer." And Jesus said, "No, I'm going to go ahead and heal him." And he does. And then nobody knew what to say. It was like, who was going to criticize a man being healed, and so put people in a little bit of a awkward position. And then he goes on to say, well, in those days, when you're in a nice meal, the table was U-shaped, and the host sat at kind of the center of the U, if you will, and the guests of honor sat by him, and everybody else sat down the legs, if you will, but you reclined at a table. And usually the guests of honor came in late. And so Jesus said, when you come into a meal like this, don't go sit up there by the host, because the guests of honor may be coming here in a few minutes. And when they come, they're going to make you move, and you'll be embarrassed. And, just go sit down at the end. And if you get invited to the seat of honor, awesome, but don't just presume. And then he said, and by the way, when you're having meals, why do you only invite people that can pay you back? Why don't you just invite people that can't pay you back? Why don't you invite the poor, or people who have nothing to offer you? And the point is, what we discussed was he was teaching about the kingdom of God all the time. It wasn't just about what to do at a meal. It was the fact that we get invited to the Lord's table and we don't deserve to be there. We're not going to repay the Lord anything. And then it was like he was on a roll on this on this particular meal. Then he tells this story about a guy who was going to have a banquet, and he sent out the RSVP so that everybody would change their schedules and be ready, which was very customary in those days. And then when it came time to eat, he sent the message out saying dinner's ready. And people say, well, I can't come. I got a business deal, or I'm getting married or whatever. All of those were excuses that the people in that culture would have known you would have never used in an event like that, because you would have already said that. You'd have already said, hey, when you got the RSVP, I can't come. And so the man who was hosting the banquet said, well, I tell you what, let's just go invite everybody to come, and all of a sudden he throws the door open of hospitality. And again, he's teaching about the kingdom of God, that the gospel is actually going to welcome everybody, and not just the ones who think they're supposed to be there. So, and in the context of that, we actually did the Lord's Supper, where we talked about Jesus was at another table where he decided to just completely reinterpret a profound theological event in the life of Israel, the Passover, and point it toward the future to where we will be sharing a feast in heaven. And the fact that Jesus even used that imagery to talk about heaven. What's heaven going to be like? Well, it's like a great banquet, where everybody gets to eat and enjoy and experience the bounty of what God's provided for them. So, yeah, it was just table talk with Jesus is kind of what we talked about, and I think it kind of normalizes the teachings about the kingdom of God, because I think we all can identify with what it means to be sitting around a table and having conversation with people. So I kind of just encouraged our church to reclaim our meals a little bit, reclaim some routine, if you will, some rhythm, and I think you can use those times in a special way. So, not that I'm going to re-preach the whole sermon, but that
was close. That was pretty close.
Yeah. So,
Barry, we can't hear
hold on,
you.
Barry, you're still muted. Barry, you're muted.
Barry.
Now,
Katie, sorry. Katie, this is still fresh for you because you just snuck underneath the wire so that you could have said that you listened to the sermon before we got on the air tonight. I'm not going to, far be it for me to point out something like that.
Yeah.
But what did you take away from it, since it is fresh? Seriously, what did you get?
Well, I like the idea of banquet. I've always liked the idea of banquet imagery. It's very appealing to me, like in the kingdom of God, because I think maybe at the lowest level, if you just ask someone, like, when you think about friendship or community or life lived to the fullest, I think you can picture like a very jovial, a very fun, a very inviting and warm, like, banquet table, whether that's family, immediate family, or like for me, I think it's my time in seminary just had so many friends and people, and we had a lot of shared meals and potlucks, and I can think about the various tables that we would hang out in. And so, and to think about just the kingdom of God, that the eternal will be one day this great banquet in the sky, or, whatever, wherever. It's very appealing to me. I like that image. That'll sell, I think that's an appealing message for people. And so to dwell on that and see how Jesus, I like the idea of table talk, just how Jesus used those moments that are very human, and we all have to eat, but how he chose to use the time when people are eating to build something. It's very captivating to me. That's my personal take on it.
That's awesome.
Not theological.
My 2 cents in is just sitting here listening and just ruminating on what it means to me even right now. Is just meals were a huge deal with my family, in the passing of my parents this past few months. That's something that appeals to me in all of this, is just to sit down again at a table, just to talk about your day and just talk about what's going on. And some of you know or don't know, my parents both passed in the past few months. My dad a couple of weeks ago, and my dad suffered with Alzheimer's. And, just to sit at a table where he's in his right mind and can play dominoes again and just be him. That's something that appeals to me in this. Kurt, one of the things that I love about Luke is he had a different perspective than the other gospel writers. And so when he put something in, he thought it was really, really important, because he left out stuff that we would have thought. But it's interesting to me that he chose these meals, and he chose some of the more mundane things. Jesus was always finding an opportunity to teach about the kingdom in every just everyday situation. Tell us about that.
I want to offer one perspective on that. And as I listened to the sermon, as I processed since then, I think the fact that Thanksgiving is coming up here in just a couple of weeks, and typically in our society, food is such a big part of that. And a lot of times extended family that don't see each other very often try to make the holidays, and particularly Thanksgiving, a time to be together. And that's often around a meal, and a very big meal. And each family has its own traditions many relate it to turkey and dressing and things of that nature. And it is a banquet, much like Katie was alluding to. And we look forward to that in that shared meal. And I think it's rich in context and meaning. It is satisfying, but you hope there's a gathering of people who just enjoy being together, like you said, Katie, and appreciate each other's presence. And it should be a high holy moment. I think there are probably some families who may not be inclined to bless their food most of the time, but man, if you can't say a blessing at the Thanksgiving meal, then I don't know what to do for you. But it's a time of thanks and just of acknowledging God's provision and just the sacredness. And to Dennis's earlier point, the Italians typically appreciate a meal, not so much breakfast or lunch, but oftentimes dinner is that shared meal that can go on for hours, and nobody's in a hurry, and it's just being together over good food, good wine, just the company and the fellowship. It's rich with meaning, and unfortunately we've not captured or kept or cultivated that same appreciation. But I hope with the holidays coming up, some of that'll be back. Unfortunately, with the global pandemic, a lot of people's plans will be interrupted. And so sadly, what you'll see, Google searched a lot, is Thanksgiving dinner for one, and that's just sad. How do you make Thanksgiving dinner for one, and what's the point? So all that's going through my mind. The other thing, and I'm sorry, back to your deal on Luke's perspective, I'm thinking as I think about the shared meal and what Jesus tried to teach about intimacy with a meal, but also humility at the meal. He was talking about the need to not think too highly of yourself. Well, this is Luke 14. Just a few chapters later in Luke 22, he talks about another meal, the Lord's Supper, the Last Supper. And at that meal, he was sharing the Passover supper feast with his disciples. And all four gospel writers talk about that experience. John talks about Jesus washing the disciples' feet. But Luke tells us why he had to wash the disciples' feet and how it ties into this story in Luke 14, because Luke tells us when they got together at this Last Supper, they began to argue about who was the greatest. And it seems to imply that some of that same jockeying for position was going on as was happening at the Pharisees' house. And so how did Jesus curtail at that time? Strip down and wash their feet like the lowest servant would do. And so the richness in all of this is the celebration, the appreciation, the intimacy of relationship, and the humility that ought to be expressed in a part of all of that.
The irony I've never thought about it like this, but it was a bunch of fishermen and basically outcasts or people that are of no standing, following
tax
a criminal.
collectors.
Following a criminal of the day, jockeying to see who could be closest to the criminal. It's just funny what God does. I think one of the things that I love about the food stuff is we hired a couple of years ago. We hired Katie Seeley. She is our hospitality director, but she's also a trained chef. And one of the things that endeared me to Katie is when I was interviewing her and a couple other people. Of course, I've known Katie for a long time. One of the things that stuck out is she said that food is ministry. And she talked about the intimacy of food, not just feeding people, but just the act of being together. And so her whole pursuit in culinary school was to figure out how to kind of broker these meetings around the table, how to get people around that table. And so even today, we know the value of sitting. We rarely invite anybody that's not close to us into our homes. That's just not an American thing to do. In fact, we're leery of bringing people in. That's, so Jesus is talking to me when he talks about going to find the people who can't eat or won't eat. And man, there's a lot of meat on this bone.
When I think about it, I was thinking about this. I didn't talk about this in the sermon, but when I was growing up in our home, and we finally, the last house that we lived in, when you came in the house, my dad, we had a front porch that we closed in, so you could watch TV out there and all that, and then you kind of came in the living room. But when you came in the living room, you could see straight through the dining room into the kitchen all the way to the back door, and the bedrooms were on the side. And right in the middle of the dining room, was this big dining room table. In fact, Cindy and I still have it in storage. And it was in other words, if you were going to walk through the house, you had to go around the table, and it was sitting in the middle, okay, right in the heart of the house. And I can remember our home was the gathering home. I guess every family has one of those where it just seems like that's where you have everything, Thanksgiving, Christmas, it's just our home was at home. And I can remember when you were younger, that table was where the adults sat, and then we kind of had to sit around them, but when they finished eating, my mom and them would they would clean everything up, but nobody left. Nobody moved. The table was where everybody stayed, and they played like canasta, or they played rook, or they played dominoes, or all the grown-ups, men and women. And we as kids, we would play for a little bit, but it's so funny. I can remember we would all just kind of just pull our chairs around and sit and just watch and dream about, well, one day we're going to be at the table, and we're watching to try to figure out what game are they playing? How do you play this? And it was almost like when one of us got invited, you were like, oh man, you're in, one day we're going to be in. And I just think back how that was at the very center of our home. And I didn't think much about it, but everything happened around that table. I mean, it was the family stories. It was celebrations. It was when you got engaged, you came to that table and you brought your fiance, and everybody gathered on that table to celebrate. If it was a birthday, you sat at that table, and the birthday party happened at that table. And I think back on just how that was right in the very heart of our house. And I never have thought much about that until just recently, and how special that was. And we just took it for granted. That's just where everybody migrated to. And it was just weird. You'd eat dinner, and, my parents, when we had a lot of family over, we would stay up late. So, it'd be 11 o'clock, midnight, and everybody is still in the dining room. I mean, it's like nobody wanted to leave that place. I think there's just something about that connection that's important, that I think we have to. I'm not going to say that we've lost it. I think we still have it, but I think that perhaps we need to be thoughtful about ways to be inclusive, so that those who don't have that can find that, with those of us who do have it. And I think that was one of the things Jesus was pointing us to.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I said in my sermon was, Jesus is inviting everybody to this thing. Well, who are we inviting? Who are we welcoming?
Katie,
in,
we don't often, unlike the Romans, we don't often spend tons and tons of time around the table, at least in the Metroplex, to my knowledge. I'm sure there are people that do that, but we're all busy. And, like my wife and I, her schedule is so completely different. She teaches until late at night. And so our whole lives, it's been a different kind of thing. So what are the kinds of things we do to replace that intimacy? What are the kinds of things that if we don't get the meal, what are the other opportunities we have to share life and to teach this lesson of just intimacy and caring for each other? And I didn't finish my question, but
Hasn't coffee kind of
I know. I thought the same thing, Kurt.
I was wondering about that.
It's a cup of coffee. I mean, I think coffee, y'all tell me, I think we've championed the one-on-one coffee, certainly. But that's different than like the communal table. And so I'm trying to think, and we have like college ministry, we did share meals pre-COVID, because that was important to me because of this. I like the imagery, but we do things together. Like we play intramural softball, but that's not quite the same as the shared table either. So I'm kind of, is there an equivalent? Like, have we just lost it? That's the question I'm kind of got rattling around.
I don't know. My kids, as again, we've gone through all the estate stuff and what do you want and what do you keep? Thankfully, I'm gonna put this out there. Those of you that are my age and older, get rid of all your stuff before you come to the end. My parents did a fabulous job. Of course, my dad had Alzheimer's, so my mom had no idea. My dad had no idea what my mom was throwing away, and so she threw away almost everything when they moved down here 3 years ago. So I'm thankful. But one of the things that they kept was an Ethan Allen dining room table that they had. It's my earliest memory of a dining room table, and they've had that in their home. And my daughter, Mackenzie, who loved my grandmother. If the house was burning and it was Save Daddy or Save Grandma, I'm on fire. I'm just telling you. The only thing she wanted was that table because of the memories of sitting there with my dad and my mom, playing games, eating, being at that table. It wasn't the furniture, but it was touching it and seeing it and just knowing that those were the deep times of conversation, with my parents. And so whatever we have to do to recapture that in whatever format, we have to keep that alive, especially as we commune with each other, especially as we go generation to generation. Right now, I'd be a pitiful example. I know, Kurt, you've got grandkids, and you guys do some stuff over like Thanksgiving. Talk about the importance of that.
Well, for us, we began a tradition several years ago of taking our extended family to Riverbend. That was partly Kim and I lived in apartments for several years, which thankfully we've rectified, and we got a dining room table delivered just this morning. Wow. So we now have furniture in the new house. So it's pretty exciting. Kim did a great job picking it out. And so when you've lived without space and furniture for a long time, having it is very, very special. But we will continue, even with the pandemic, here in a couple of weeks, taking our extended family to Riverbend Retreat Center, where we do have enough space to not just feed everyone, but to sleep and house everyone and to have that family time. And so we cook the whole meal there, and there's a lot of it. And it's a large table full of food that we eat on for several days. And for somebody like me, whose favorite food is quality leftovers, it's
the best time of the year.
Oh my gosh, it's fantastic. But it is just about the shared meal and about the youngest to the oldest. And when you've got 20-something people who are all just trying to eat around the same time, and they're all kind of being gracious and considering one another before themselves, it is just the epitome of what we're talking about here. And it's crazy and it's messy, but it's precious. It truly is precious. And so how do we offer the best of that to people who haven't had that opportunity, who have had fractured families and who have been alone a lot? I don't know, but it's like everything to do with the gospel. It's going to be there eventually for all of us. And if you missed it for 60 or 70 years here on earth, you're going to enjoy it for all eternity with the big family, the extended family, the faith family.
We have a picture
eternity.
We have a picture right by our dining room table, and it's one of those strange perspective pictures that looks like an eternal table. It's all set with everything, and it's a depiction of that supper in heaven where everybody gets to sit down and eat at one time. So it looks like just a long forever forever table. And I've always been fascinated with that. Well, Cindy Wiles, somebody that we may know, has said that for her group of friends, the yard and sitting around your all's pool has become a great place just to hang out and to be. And so that place will forever be touched with just that sense of being and belonging and love. Maybe somebody else wants to shout out about how you're finding this in your life. How are you encouraging this intimacy this time together, man? I'd be glad to share that and let everybody see that.
I think the church, to me, what I love about the church, there are a lot of things I love about the church, but as these relationships get forged in the church, when you live in an era now where we're more mobile, and so there's more transition. People may move for jobs and those kinds of things. I think back, when I was a kid, all of my buddies, their dads would change jobs, but they never left Birmingham. I mean, you know what I mean? It was almost like that wasn't even there was an anomaly every once in a while, somebody would get a job somewhere else. You're like, oh, okay, that's awesome. But for the most part, all of my buddies, their dads might change jobs, but they would have never thought of leaving their community. That just wasn't going to happen. And you think about our culture, our society today, where there's so much mobility. Well, the church, to me, has the beautiful opportunity to step into that gap to where we become that place to where that extended family now is actually comprised of those spiritual relationships that are forged in the church. And so things like Thanksgiving or those kind of celebrations, you begin to invite people who may not have that kind of connection. And I would tell y'all, Cindy's really good at that. And so we have typically had people at our Thanksgiving meals or special meals in our lives, folks from different cultures, people who are here who don't have that, don't know what that is. And it's at first you think, now, wait a minute, is that an intrusion into our family? And we're trying to make family, memories. We're trying to make family, you know what I mean? You're trying to establish something, and all of a sudden you got two families here that are just so really different. But actually, those have become some of our favorite things. Our kids talk about that, about these different folks that have joined us through the years. And it's just reminding me of how important that is. And that is a part of the church. And to me, that strikes at the heart of kind of what Jesus was saying, but remember, there are so many people who need this kind of a relational connection and this kind of community. And maybe if it's not a meal, I think Katie, you were talking a little bit about there are other options besides a meal. You're exactly right. I mean, whatever it might be, you think about y'all's softball team. It has become a multicultural experience, and so the goal is not to win every softball game. The goal.
No, I think Ryan would call you on that. I think Ryan would call you on that.
Okay, but think about what's happening though. Y'all are making some great memories and building some relationships that are just crucial to people's health. And I guess the church has got to figure out how to do that in this era, and because it's important and people need it. And so coffee, it's weird to me because I'm not a coffee drinker. And so that's been an interesting phenomenon to me that people will go and, pay $4 for a cup of coffee. I'll be honest with y'all. I've never met a $4 cup of coffee. That's just me personally. But I've realized it's not really that for a lot of us. I did it this morning. I had breakfast with a group of folks from Abilene, and I ordered a cappuccino because that was the only thing I knew to do, because I looked at it and they were like, what you going to get? And I was like, okay, dark, mild, light. Do you have cappuccino? And because Kurt has taught me that I can drink that in Rome, so that's what I ordered today. And the lady said, "Would you like anything in it?" I said, "Yeah, make it sweet and really creamy and not taste like a cappuccino. That's what I would like." So that's what they did for me. But actually
like
around that table, this morning around the table, it was all about community, life, fellowship, and I mean, I drank a half a cup of coffee. You know what I mean? That wasn't the point. So anyway,
I think part of it is while there's a great thing about being community, Jesus used every one of these opportunities for a teaching lesson about the kingdom. In the Jewish culture, to sit down every meal was to be reminded of history and family. And they had more feast days than days on the calendar. I mean, there was a feast for almost every day, but most of that was about remembering and loving and holding on to tradition, and something we've lost. I think I know we have in my family. I hate to say, but the past couple of months as we've lost my family, one of the most precious things has just been sitting around and telling stories and reconnecting and sharing those kind of tribal memories and talking about how we've seen Jesus at work in our lives and through these hard situations, and to be reminded about how godly my parents were and all that we owe, and so just again, a reminder that as important as it is for us to sit down and share coffee or share a meal, Jesus used it as an opportunity to give life lessons and to talk about being who's really the best and the brightest and the one that needs to be up front. So just a reminder, we're asking the Bible as we sit down and as we eat to share these things with our families and with our children and to keep these things alive. So,
I told a story Sunday morning about one of the things that I love that Cindy has brought into our family. We've turned our table into a place of blessing. And so we have just special times A lot of times it's birthdays. When you have as many people as you do, they're birthdays all the time. You know, when it's your birthday at our house, we have a meal, and then everybody, we did it Sunday night. It was Josiah's birthday. Everybody goes around and says, here's what I love about you. Here are some things that I like about you, that I appreciate about you. And so everybody shares a word. It's interesting. We have two grandsons, as y'all know. They're 14 and 13. And our 13-year-old grandson, this summer, their birthdays are real close to each other. And so we were going around the table. Well, those two boys have been through a lot, but they've been together their whole lives. They're almost like twins. They're a year apart. But anyway, we were going around the table talking about one of them. What do we love about him? What do we like about him? We got around to his brother, and you never know. I mean, you know how kids are. What do I like about you? It's your birthday, and so I really like that it's your birthday, and we're getting cake. Sometimes that's what happens. This year, we got around to the younger one, who's 13, and the older one, 14's birthday, and the younger one sat there for a second. And he said, well, what I love about my brother is that he has really always been there for me. And all of a sudden he just tears up, and tears just start rolling. Well, then he gets embarrassed. But I'm just telling y'all, it's like I looked at my wife and I thought, mission accomplished. This is what we're after in this family, is to have that moment to where it was a little bit awkward, for sure, because we didn't see it coming. But it was the sweetest thing, y'all, and it just reminded me, this really matters, to be able to speak these words and to share these moments together and to do it around something that feels very common, a meal. But God, all of a sudden it just transcended into something really sacred there for just a few minutes between two teenage boys, who can really get home to each other. But we were just reminded these ties and these moments are really special. And you got to make room. Katie's always telling us you got to make space for stuff. You got to make space for it, and it's not easy, but man, it's memorable. And so we haven't forgotten that particular birthday. I'm just going to tell you that it was pretty special for us. So,
well, Katie, Kurt, at some point I usually ask a question like this: what's been on your brain that you've wanted to say and you haven't found the right time to say it? What's on your minds or hearts about this particular subject matter? Katie, I'll start with you.
I don't know that I haven't said. I think through, not certainly during COVID, it's complicated, but how we share the table, like how do Ryan and I share that? And we share it with students a lot. That's the obvious, but we're really trying to be good neighbors, like literal neighbors, and trying to make space where we both have jobs that just demand a lot from us. And so we've talked about this. Home kind of becomes this little, like, I almost wish no one knew where I lived, like it's just this little retreat. And so we don't necessarily feel like that's the best thing. That's more descriptive than prescriptive about our reality. So we're trying to look at how we're cordial with our neighbors, but we can't get over that, that hurdle, and COVID doesn't make it easy. And so just thinking about how we do that and what it takes, and is it really, I think it's possible right now. It's just more complex, and so there's no answer, but that's kind of what I'm thinking about. How to share the table.
Yeah. Kurt wakes up every day telling parables and walking among the people. And
well, for me, I would just say that the comparable in our society to what sharing a meal was during Jesus' time is making that space to be humble, to be vulnerable, to be hospitable, to open your life up in a way that blesses, perhaps financially, but even more just with presence, and to respect people and to value people by sharing what you have with them, expecting nothing in return.
Wow.
Let that soak in.
Yeah.
Well, you guys tonight, a fitting word before the holidays about inviting people in and making space and using the moments to enrich your family's life together. Last thing I'd say is I'm always reminded that some of the great times for me aren't necessarily great times for everybody else because of associated memories or loss or, and so this is a hard season. And so as we talk about being around the tables together, Kurt, I think you're right. There's going to be a lot of those banquet dinners, but I'm talking about the banquet with the foil over the top going in the oven for some people, and they're not going to have that deep experience. And so one of the things we offer is community at church. You don't have to have a nuclear family. You don't have to have tons of extended relatives that drive to your house or invite you to theirs. We want you to know that God's house is your house. His table is your table. And during this time of year, it's harder this year. There's some things that we normally do that's just really tough right now. I know the students, especially Katie, are used to having big Thanksgiving meals and cooking turkeys and doing all of that. And throughout the life of our church, that's a hard thing to replace this year. So I think all of us, it's incumbent for all of us to kind of reimagine that season this year, to think about what we can do this year to reclaim that and to own that so that it's not lost to just loneliness or hatefulness or selfishness, that it's not lost. We've got an opportunity here to do something new and different. So we invite you to come to our church. You can be a part of this. This is family. In some ways, this is something we can do right now that Jesus couldn't have done, to be with however many are watching tonight or will watch on into the future. Our Sunday services are for you. We want you to feel like part of the family. We have prayer that you can be a part of. We have people that are willing to answer questions and listen to you and to be a part. And so Andy's going to put up some information that you can, even tonight, if there's something that you want to know, maybe it's a deep pain or something. I feel like this time of year, there are people that just kind of sit on their pain and just need somebody to talk to. That was an important part of the table in my family. Is my mom would usually start it with something like, "I know you done something wrong," or "No, that was just for me." But she would usually figure out a couple of questions to get you talking about your life. And she just knew how to peel your onion a little bit, just to kind of get you to talk about stuff. So if you need somebody to help with that, we have a counseling center. We have a prayer ministry. We have people in our church that are well versed in helping you. And if they can't, we know other resources to call upon. So please, during this season, don't be alone. Don't be bashful. Don't let the devil use your loneliness to keep you from reaching out or from embarrassment. If you need us, we're here. It's harder for us to find you than it is for you to find us in some respects, and that's a hard thing. So please reach out. We're asking for that. This Sunday morning, 9:30, we've got lots of different events that we're going to do in different ways throughout the whole of the season. During Christmas, which is always a huge part of celebration during Thanksgiving, we're trying to find some alternatives and some ways to bless you. So you'll find those things online at fbca.org, and we are doing our best to reach out. So let us know. This is our 32nd episode, and we are finished for the season. So we have finished this half of the season, and at some point after the new year, we're going to reconvene, and it'll be better and brighter, fancier, hot beverages for everybody. I know I can't promise all that, but we're going to do it again, probably about the same level we're doing it now, just to be real honest with you, but it's been fun.
You don't know.
Final words. I'm going to let the pastor, maybe a cliffhanger or something here to get people to come back. But Katie, Kurt, just final words to close out this holiday season this year as we end our time together.
Well, I would just say, going into the holidays, we know it can be a challenging time, and you need to open yourself certainly to the people around you, to the church, but to God. I'd encourage you to read your Bible, read the Gospels, read Luke, read these stories for yourself and imagine that you're enjoying the very presence of Jesus as he's telling these stories to you, and you're sharing that intimacy with him, and invite him to your meal, whatever that is.
And if you don't have stories, read the scripture out loud to them. That's a good thing to do too. Katie, what do you have to say to our peeps?
Well, I think it is an interesting time. It just is going to be weird the next few months and weeks. And so I'd say just let's be open to what God has for us, not what we can't have. And that he may even be enough or surprise us or be present in ways that we're not used to. And so just keep our eyes open and make space for whatever that is. Yeah.
Thank you, Katie. Thanks, Kurt. I love you both. Dennis, love you too. Close us out. And just a reminder to everybody, 9:30 Sunday morning, we are reopening our church. If you want to come online, you can request a space or schedule a space. We're still doing that by invitation, or not by invitation, by ticketing. And and so please come on and be a part. So Dennis, take us home.
Well, thank you. It's been good. And we've seen prayer requests come through online today. And so, and Nancy, we're praying for Ryan and Sarah, and we'll pray for the Philippines as we've been asked. We'll pray as God leads us. But I guess the thing I would close with, one of the things I love about the way Luke tells the story of Jesus, when he tells these stories about Jesus being at tables, I think, again, it just normalizes the ministry of Jesus in some way, puts it in terms we can really understand. And I would just say, let's just be looking for him in the everyday. That's where he tends to show up. It's just in the everyday. And so I would say, instead of thinking there's going to be some big special, encounter with him, there are a handful of those. Those happen. But more often than not, you meet Jesus in the everyday around the table.
Sure.
Just like I shared that story from our. I would tell you that when we saw our grandsons make that kind of expression, it was almost like a piece of heaven broke through into our kitchen, and it was totally unanticipated, but very much appreciated. So just let him show up on the everyday. He's pretty good at just bringing something supernatural into your everyday normal life. So that's where I'd look for him.
Amen.
Well, Lord willing and creek don't rise, we're going to come back sometime after the first of the year. So blessings on you all. Happy Thanksgiving, happy Christmas, and all of those kinds of blessings on everybody out there. Come see us, holler at us. We want to love you more and more. Thank you.
We'll
See you,
see
Katie.
you. Season 2. Season 2 is coming.
Yeah.